I've had people where it's just like it seems like maybe they're overtraining or they're not able to lose body fat, and trying to think, is there just too much stress going on? What's happening? And getting them to dial back on even what wouldn't be excessive activity for most people suddenly seems to jumpstart their progress. So I've seen that happen. And again, it's something worth playing with and testing. And I'll tell you, most people are so reticent to back away if they've established something as a pattern, especially, and they feel good about the fact that they're now doing half an hour a day of this whatever activity. To get them to just do a 14-day experiment where they dial back and try it, like, people are really resistant to that. But I've seen it work out in their favor.
3, 2, 1.
Never has there been a better time to be alive in human history. If you're not feeling it, you must discover why. Join Matthew Bolton in developing and applying a framework of objective optimism toward a flourishing life of meaning, health, and happiness. Here's your host, Matthew Bolton.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mr. Brightside. I'm Matthew Bolton. A lot of us think that in exercise, more is better. We all just don't do enough. But perhaps we're giving too much. In today's interview, our guest Chad Morris discusses how people give up way too much time, money, effort, sweat, and stress in return for way too few fitness returns and way too many tears and frustration and discouragement. What if we could do a lot less for a lot more? Now, I personally have been looking for a reboot in my exercise routine since being thrown off track, as many of us have been during COVID times. I felt like there was something missing in what I was doing before, or in any case, something less than optimal. And after talking to Chad, I see that my feelings were understated. But I tell you happily that I am now super motivated to get to work, as I really feel I have something super high leverage that will yield the results I'm looking for and that we're all looking for. If you're frustrated about giving so much, yet seeing so few results, it may be time to challenge common wisdom. As Chad said in the excerpt you just heard a minute ago, people are really resistant to these ideas. But what have you got to lose? Well, I'll tell you. Countless hours of unnecessary and even counterproductive effort and stress, as well as the accompanying discouragement when we don't get what we want out of it. I can't really begin to say here how much is packed in this discussion, but much of it could be life-saving, literally. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Hi, everybody. Welcome now to our interview. Last episode, I talked with Lisa Van Dam about parenting and education. Well, today we have on Chad Morris, who is Lisa's husband. Now, I don't know where he'd rank that on his list of achievements, and that won't put you on the spot here, but that's not why I've invited him today. One of the key components of an optimal life, and that we focus on plenty on this show, is physical fitness. And I've been excited to mine in person some of Chad's intriguing ideas and expertise after being very impressed with his 2019 talk at the Objective Standard Conference, that's TOSCon, titled Basic Principles and Pitfalls of Fitness Training. Chad was a founder of Myogenics Fitness in 1998, located in West Hollywood. He worked personally with Mike Mentzer starting in 1997 and with Dr. Doug McGuff, that's Body by Science, in 1998 when starting Myogenics Fitness. Chad was super slow certified by Ken Hutchins in 2003. He enjoys continually working to improve his company's ability to help people over 60 and busy professionals looking to maximize quality of life in the smartest, most time-efficient manner possible. Chad has been interviewed by international media, has delivered fitness presentations to top corporations, and has privately consulted with many executives and celebrities. Chad, thanks so much for making the time today.
Thank you.
Right on. So before we get into anything, although this might bring us into something, I wanted to mention first off that only after watching your 29 talk, one of my notes was Mike Mentzer with a question mark, right? So I had that in there. And then a friend of mine and partner in intellectual discovery and physical fitness over the past 20 years, Jason Cresswell, after I told him to watch your video, said I was going to invite you on, he thought the same thing. And then he comes back with this link and he's like, yep, check it out, right? And then I see now that you actually worked with him. So maybe I'll ask you to tell listeners who Mike Mentzer is. And I'm curious, what was your relationship with him? Maybe I'll add in all at once. Where were you in your own fitness context at the time you met him? And why were you drawn to him? And how was the progression of how he modified that context? Is that a lot?
Well, I mean, who is this guy, Mike Mentzer, was kind of my first reaction hearing about him too. So I had gotten out of shape in kind of during my stint in college, put on a lot of weight, was finding that doing running and the things that I normally didn't work for me so well, or really at all, to change my body composition. And I mentioned this to a friend of mine, like with sort of an exasperated, I got to get back and start lifting weights again, or like doing something else. And he said, "Oh, do you know about this guy named Mike Mentzer?" I'm like, "No, who's this guy?" I said, "Oh, he writes all these articles and books, and he advocates training for a really short amount of time and working out like once every 5 to 8 days. And you're training for like 20 minutes at a time at that frequency." And my first reaction is like, "What? That's strange. What is this?" And then it kind of settled into my mind that when I ran track and cross country in high school, I didn't get in great shape until we started the track season. So we'd go running every day and I'd get in better and better shape, but it really got a lot better when we started doing during season meets, where we'd be resting for several days and then just doing these brief bouts of training, especially during track season, where we do really high intensity efforts and then have rest between them. And so I thought, well, maybe there is something to this general. Let me figure. So I started looking into what he was saying and started practicing it, and then learned that he happened to live and operate a business pretty close to where I was working at the time. So I ended up hiring him as my personal trainer and becoming friends and getting to know his whole backstory, which he'd been educated in this mode of thinking what's the minimum necessary as opposed to the maximum possible. He'd been taught that by a guy named Arthur Jones, who was the founder of Nautilus, which is, Arthur isn't around anymore, but he was a very interesting guy, and Nautilus is certainly still around. And that really revolutionized people's thinking and exercise. And they still, there's a lot that was studied by Nautilus that has yet to make its way into the mainstream fitness world.
All right. Well, very good. So
I should mention, so Mike Mentzer is an interesting guy. He was a former bodybuilder and Mr. Universe title holder. He competed against Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the day. So he's pretty famous among bodybuilders, which is its own whole world. And I would put in a separate category of fitness, but it's related.
Okay. And just a quick aside on that one, we're both admirers of Ayn Rand, and I wonder if Mike Mentzer led you to Ayn Rand, or Ayn Rand led you to him. It sounded like you more just heard of him from a guy in fitness context. Is that what happened? I heard him in the context of someone who was interested in Ayn Rand as well. So. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. So anyway, what is myogenics?
That's just the name of my personal fitness studio that I started in Los Angeles and in West Hollywood. So we just wanted a name that sort of came with the connotations that it's more technical, kind of scientific perspective on exercise. And so I went to the Greek roots, myo, muscle, and genix, genesis. But it's just the proper name of my fitness studio.
Excellent. All right, then. So you start off in your talk, and I think it's a benefit here to emphasize what is exercise. You distinguish exercise versus activity and exercise versus training. Mm-hmm. What about that? Can you give us some?
So I think if you start to think about what exercise is, many of us think of anytime we're doing something that's somewhat demanding, we tend to call that exercise. But really, the point of exercise is it's deliberate activity that we're doing for a particular purpose, for the purpose of improving our physical bodies in some way. And it's undertaken for that purpose. It's not just anything. And the one point that I tried to make in that lecture you mentioned seeing me give was the fact that if someone is active enough in their life, they may not need exercise. I think the idea of exercise is it is that selective, deliberative activity we're doing to get those results. But if someone were active enough outside of that deliberate effort, they might not need to engage in it. It might be counterproductive. take somebody who's in a just extremely like logging trees or some career where they're doing all kinds of work. They might just need to rest and recover as much as they possibly can, and doing additional activity may confer no additional benefits to that person. Most of us don't live in that situation, especially in the modern world.
Certainly not. Yeah, because I was thinking that in the like you mentioned, like an outdoorsman gets a lot of the benefits of exercise, but then I thought you mentioned something like that he's still not getting enough exercise. Is missing any benefits? Like I was thinking of me being home shoveling in my driveway when I was staying home in Canada for a time in a couple hours and just feeling good about that. But then I kind of thought, ooh, maybe I'm missing out on something. Is that a good workout?
So I'm not sure what I might have said.
Okay.
Well, for most of us, when we're engaged in an activity that sort of singularly feels challenging, and we say, "Oh, that was good exercise," I think for most of our context, it probably wasn't. So we have to think of what's the intensity and the frequency, the duration of the activity. How is that spaced across a lifetime, and are we involving all the parts of the body in the ways that we're maybe capable of? Okay. But it's a tricky question to answer unless we know exactly what that full context is of somebody's. But most people, I think, fall into a category that there's a lot that they can benefit by doing deliberate exercise activity.
Certainly, and you mentioned in exercise versus training that it's problematic to look at athletes and performance training as models for exercise. What is that about?
So think of one sport that I like to watch is Formula One racing. And if you think of when you take a car and try to tune it to perform at the absolute highest level, you start to pretty quickly run into trade-offs where you're going to get higher performance, but you're more and more likely to cause things to break down mechanically, and you're going to suffer engine failures, and things are going to wear out much faster. And instead of your engine lasting like a road car for maybe 100, 200,000, 300,000 miles, whatever people's cars last these days, you're going to have an engine that lasts maybe one race if you're lucky. And so there's a trade-off with seeking the upper limits of performance and longevity. And most of us, in terms of exercise benefits, want longevity as part of what we're pursuing. Most professional athletes are pretty much in various ways exceeding the threshold where they're getting some negative returns on the longevity of their joints and of their health in various ways. So if you go and you look at a lot of these major athletes, Ironman triathletes, football players, I mean, you name it, they can have incredible performance when they're at their prime. And most of them, it's not something they're benefiting from in their 70s, 80s, 90s. Right. And I suppose to put it mildly.
To put it mildly. So they'd have to really adjust their habits after they're done their career to really reverse some of that stuff. I suppose they could. If you would take an athlete and say, look, here's what you've been doing.
The category of person, but I mean, some of the things are going to be permanent. Wear and tear on joints, and there's certain things that just, there's not a huge amount that can be done to fix that. So, it's just often people's model for amazing health is this athlete that can do superhuman seeming things, which, these are incredible feats. I'm amazed by them and inspired by them as much as the next guy. But don't be fooled into thinking that's automatically meaning they have super health at the same time. Probably the opposite is true.
All right. So getting into some of the principles you mentioned there, the number one was safety. Why is safety number one for you? And in what ways do people and trainers compromise safety in exercise?
Yeah. So it's number one in part because of this. It's so easy to attach to performance as a goal. And in a way that will compromise the safety profile of what we're doing. Because if our goal with exercising is to enhance the physical capacity of our bodies to live through a lifetime, whatever that is, I'm hoping my lifetime is extended as much as possible, both in length and in keeping the quality of my life high through that lifespan of, hopefully well past 80 or 90 years old. So how can we set up those conditions? And if you look at the way that a lot of people train, they treat it as a sport where they're risking if you go look up bloopers, YouTube videos of things that happen at the gym, like these things come out probably daily. And there are compilations of these things, and people doing things with weights where the weights fall on their feet, where they're using too much and they get out of position and it tears a shoulder or an elbow, or if you watch power lifters and what happens even under conditions of where they're really skilled at the things, the kinds of accidents that can happen to knees and just all kinds of things. When your goal is to really push the limits as an external goal of some sort, as a performance goal against the weight or the body or another person. And so I think if you're trying to optimize for those performance metrics, people just tend to work themselves into a situation where they're taking more and more risk to get those out. So setting safety as the kind of first level criterion, I think makes sense when our goal is to exercise to the benefit of our lifetime physical health. Which isn't to take away from if somebody's goal is to be a professional soccer player or weightlifter or ski racer or whatever it is, that those pursuits come with risks. Those careers have lifetimes that are pretty limited, and then you've got to find something else to do, and your body's probably going to be abused. That's fine as long as you understand that's the situation. And I put exercise in a different category, and someone who's a professional skier, runner, cyclist, whatever, trains to train their body to perform at a high level. But that's figuring out how to optimally use everything for that sport and tune everything for that sport. That's what training is, as opposed to just exercise to improve the physical capacity and functioning of the body.
Yeah. And that's why I'm interested to talk to you, because I know you're looking at the quality of life as your standard, right? We're looking at a good life. And that might include wanting to be a professional athlete. If you want to use your life doing that, then that's a good thing, I would say. Now I'm going for 100 though. You said 80, 90, I'm at least going for 100. I want to see what I can do here. Now, as you know, my friend sent me a couple of things, and we've been talking a lot about different things that we're hearing about fitness, and we're trying to figure it out all the time. And one of the things here that you talk about is cardiovascular benefits and stamina of this kind of more intense training, short and intense. And I guess I don't want to get into all the details of this thing because you know all about them, but some of the energy systems, it looks like yours is in the glycolytic system. And my friend wonders, and I wonder about zone 2 training. What do you think about some of the other training systems, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like what about zone 2, which is, says to have improved, claims to have improved insulin resistance, more metabolic flexibility. These are things that sound like they have long range benefits. So what's the...
So I wonder about this. And let me just say that my specialty is really in helping people to implement in practice a lot of these ideas. So I'm not a researcher. I have people that I look to that I respect as in various of these areas, compiling a lot of stuff. I look at it myself to some extent, but my real role in life is helping people where the rubber meets the road and taking what these ideas are and implementing them in practice. So I can't speak to all the research, but I can tell you that there's a question here that I would love to see answered more clearly, because I haven't been able to find this. And here's the question. You've got a group of researchers on one side that for the last more than a decade, 15 years plus, have been churning out paper after paper showing the efficacy of what's called high intensity interval training, which is becoming more and more popular. Basically, the idea that we work at a high level of exertion and take periods of rest between them. And that by every measurable indicator that these researchers study, people get equal benefits to the kind of zone 2 long, sustained, steady exercise that you're talking about, that's hours and hours and hours a week. So they'll do blood, or they'll do muscle tissue biopsies and look at the mitochondria being produced. They'll do blood analysis and look at the blood markers of cardiorespiratory function. They'll do tests of endurance and stamina using treadmills and bikes and things to test how those are improving. VO2 max tests, everything seemingly that we know of that can measure improvements in cardiorespiratory function. They throw at this and find that people are getting equal benefits doing these higher intensity intervals. And those can take many different forms. It can be 4 minutes of pretty high intensity with 3 minutes of rest. Repeat that 4 times. It can be 1 minute really intense effort, 1 minute rest, another minute rest 3 times, which is just absolutely devastating. It can be like the Tabata protocol, which there's a Japanese guy that popularized that, which is like 20 and 10 second intervals, I think is that one. It can be the one that I've been using recently is 2 20-second all out sprints with 3 minutes of rest between, and that's it. And doing that a couple times a week. And all of these different variations, if they're done to the point of really exhausting yourself, can feel a little different, but they seem to all produce about the same effects in the exercise studies generated by the people doing this. And there's a book, it's now a handful of years old, but called The 1 Minute Workout by a guy at McMaster University, who's one of the leading people in this category of research. His name will come back to me, but just a popular book sort of describing all this research, but it's out there. Now, then on the other side, you have people who are esteemed by a lot of professional athletes and endurance athletes who are really big on the zone 2 training. And, I've looked and I would love to see some of the top people, and, we quickly come up with a name of 2 to 4 1 to 2 names on each side of that, get on a podcast and kind of hash out where do they see the overlaps and differences are between each other. Because I just don't see them talking to each other. And about the best that I see typically is, people giving advice saying, well, it's too intense to do these intense intervals, so nobody's going to actually do that in practice. That's not fully satisfying to me. And I can tell you in my experience with myself and with a whole bunch of my clients, people find it much easier to do these really intense intervals, a lot of people, and to sustain them for years, which is what I've observed, not something that falls away after a few weeks. So, and that's a really long way to say, I just don't know. And I'm curious. And I suspect that the profile of benefits probably isn't exactly the same. But I can certainly tell you that in my experience of observing my own body and my sense of my capacity and my observed capacities doing things, doing the interval sprints like I'm doing is a big bump up over not doing them, and does seem to be like it's pretty darn effective. And then there's a third area, which is comparing interval sprints as they've been studied in all of these variety of ways with a strength training routine that's done in the way that I do it, and that a few people do it, where you're doing sustained efforts for around 90 seconds of each exercise, taking minimal rest between, and your heart rate can basically getting as high during that workout. And there's a similar feel, and a lot of people express and notice a lot of benefits in their cardiorespiratory function just as a consequence of that. And I'm not aware of anybody ever doing research. I mean, it's hard to do this research to get people to actually perform. And, most research lasts a handful of weeks, and then they study the results after that. Otherwise, it starts to get really expensive. And people just have various abilities. So like when we're training clients to get up to this, some people, they get there in weeks, but some people don't even get there for months, to where they're working at that level that's possible to them. So it's a tough thing to study, but I'm not aware of anybody even trying to study that. And I think it's another interesting layer of how much benefit is somebody. Clearly, we're getting some large percentage of that cardiorespiratory benefit from strength training in a certain fashion. The question is, how much is it compared to our other options? It's an interesting question, and I know that there's a lot of benefit that we observe, but yeah, I'd love to have that quantified someday.
Big time. And wouldn't we love to see, two people on either side of something in many fields talk it out and really get some answers, on the biggest ideas. Then I guess let me give you a couple of concretes. You talk about the rubber meets the road. Just let me give you a couple examples and then put that to it. So, say some things that I might do is I actually, by the way, I want to confirm you said in judging your own body, and this is what I do. I'm kind of more just trying to take what I see and apply it, see what it works, and and think the best I can to do the best I can. And what I have observed is that when I go to the gym and do like a short 30-minute, I do like once a week. I've been telling my friend for over a year now, or a couple of years, I've been like texting them like, I go check my in-body results. It's this thing that you get basically the check out the muscle mass and fat mass and all that stuff. And I get better results when I was stopped running for a while and just went to the gym once a week. I stopped even going 2 or 3 times a week. And I did about 30 minutes of pretty intense exercise, nothing to where it sounds like yours is. And that's really why I'm excited to talk to you. I want to do it better. But I said, look, I only go to the gym once a week. And I just kept repeating it. I'm only going to the gym once a week. The last time I was at the gym was this. And when I show them my results. And anyway, so I just want to confirm that. But what I want to ask is, I also like to run, and I go running sometimes. And part of it is that I feel good, like I'm doing something good too. And one of the things I do is go run down to some monument, which is a few kilometers away. And then I do a couple up the stairs, like pretty long stairs, maybe some push-ups and pull-ups or something, that they have some equipment up there. Do a couple sets of that, and then I try to run home. When I'm in good shape, I can do it. When I'm not, I can't. There's that. And then also just longer 6-7K runs sometimes. My friend does bike rides. He has knee problems, right? He does bike rides. He does a couple where he climbs up a hill, gets about 100 beats per minute, and then a longer bike ride where he does about an hour to an hour and a half, about in the 120 to 135 range. And what we want to know, does this sound counterproductive to you, neutral, productive, ideal, or something else? Just
when you say this, which are you proposing as?
I guess take them in parts. So maybe doing more of stair sprints and kind of combining that into, well, I guess running home, just a long run and then a long bike ride and a hill bike ride. Any other?
All right. So the question we have to ask is, what is our purpose? So what's the goal?
The goal is, and for me, the goal is everything you're talking about. A long life, living well, feeling good every day, being able to do the things that I want to do when I want to do them and enjoy doing them, and then have energy every day. Don't be tired. Being able to just enjoy my life as well and as long as I can. Let's say that.
Yeah. So you've mentioned a few things. So one of them, are you including in that you're lifting weights once a week? Is that right?
Oh yeah, big time. Lifting weights.
So to me,
and he would be lifting weights more often.
Yeah, to me, there's layers of importance of these activities. And I think from what I can tell in the research and discussing this with exercise physiologists and in seeing in myself and in clients for the past 24 years, however long we've been up to this, that the first level of highest importance of the most of these benefits is in the strength training, the lifting weights, and that most of those benefits probably come from from 20 minutes a week if it's done right. And then a second time a week, we'll probably bump those up, not to double, but something more. I mean, it depends on how intensely you're actually working, how much more benefit. If you're really able to extract the most out of your muscles, then it's not going to matter that much more to do a second time. And then more than that, not more productive if you're operating at that level. So that's sort of the first layer baseline in my mind of where is the strength training set up. And I think it's usually either a once or twice a week baseline for around 20 minutes, focus on big compound movements, really working to strengthen and doing it, like we were saying earlier, in a context of safety. So there are things that could be done, all of the exercises that I do in that way, I could do when I'm in my 90s, and I have clients who are in their 90s that I train currently who do these things at their level. So that's layer one. And then that's going to confer a lot of cardiorespiratory benefits. And then the next question is, well, okay, if we want to amp up that cardio even more, and then, like you said, feel that exercise high that some people describe, that I think you were alluding to, and just feeling really good getting out there. What do we do for that? Running, there's a lot about running outside, moving outside, getting around that feels good just because we're moving through the world, and that itself feels good. There's a downside in that the skill of running, depending on your body and how skilled you are at that, can more or less put wear and tear on your ankles, knees, and hips in a way that you might not be able to do. It just, you can imagine your running routine. Are you able to do that when you're 90? And if not, then is there something you are able to do when you're 90 that can start to be, that can have a similar benefit profile now, that can be part of the routine now, so that it doesn't just fall away. What often happens is, if someone gets an injury or a situation or a setback, to push back what they're doing, then it's much easier to stop exercise than to re-engineer and figure out, what can I do in this situation? Mm-hmm. So that's where a ergometer or bicycle is the most well tolerated thing, which you actually mentioned before in reference to your friend. But there's a few exceptions, but most people in most situations can do a pretty good intense effort on a bicycle, spinning pedals around, even if they can have trouble doing all kinds of other physical activities. So that's, you might want to think of incorporating something like that at a certain point, and having that become part of the rhythm, because there may be a time where there's a foot or ankle or some kind of thing that doesn't let you tolerate doing the running, but would let you tolerate getting most of those benefits on the bicycle, which doesn't mean you can't do the running, but also be cognizant of what your running technique is.
Right. Yeah. Time. Certainly, and I think a part of it is part of the fun of it is it just about feeling good, like I'm doing something good for myself. And if I feel like I can get just as many benefits, I might lose some of that anyway, if you understand what I mean. Like, mm-hmm. Part of the joy of it. Now, when you described what feeling good out there is also that. And that's really why I don't think I could be giving much of it up, because I really love being out there. But what I meant when I said feeling good, I just meant in my life, if I'm sitting around my house or having to walk my wife, going out with people, mm-hmm. and friends, I want to feel good, mm-hmm. while I'm doing anything, is what I meant, more than the rush of doing the exercise. So anyway, the recovery is another one. So how is recovery, and this is a big one, I guess, that people are really don't understand, and I didn't really hear about until several years ago with Mike Menser. How is recovery or response individual, and how can we determine how much rest each of us needs?
There's so many easy to ask questions in exercise that when I've looked into it, the understanding is vague, and recovery is one of those things where it's just hard to know. Okay, what are we looking for? Now, over a span of time, something that I did when I first encountered Mike Menzer and this idea of, you need several days of recovery if you're training really intensely, is I started tracking, writing down on a piece of paper, here's how much weight I moved, here's how long the set lasted. If you're just counting repetitions, you can fool yourself by speeding up those repetitions. And you went from 8 repetitions to 9 and you think you did better, but your time came down by 10 seconds. So what does that mean? So trying to get as many, trying to get those all of the measurements. So you see, are they really all moving forward or regressing, or what's happening here? And then what I saw in testing on myself and in a number of people is that if we were training the same body parts really to failure more often than once every 5 days or so, then over time, maybe not every single workout, but over time, the performances would be going down. And if I'm personally training the same exercise once every 5 days or less, then over time, my performance on that is improving. So that was very eye-opening, just to gather that data and get lots of data points and see that those really were the patterns. And so, like, if you try to integrate that with what I said before about training twice a week, then once somebody's at that point, which takes a while to get to, but if somebody's really pushing to a real physiological limit, then it's usually we switch to an A and B routine where they're doing somewhat different exercises and letting most of the musculature that was training mostly rest on the second day even. So they're really repeating that once a week, and it's being minimally affected, not maximally affected by the second workout. But then you kind of, there's a lot of personal variation, it seems, and some people tolerate an insane amount. And I've talked to people who've been professional athletes who have said, amongst like the professional track and field athletes, when they'd go and hang out, there'd be this one guy that would come out there every day and just do these insane things that none of them would do. Like, there's these outliers who do crazy things. And, those are the ones. If we think of there's kind of layers of these outliers, and it's really the physiological outliers that respond tremendously to activity, that get interested in exercise to start with, and that start pursuing physical education, and that end up in all the physiology departments. And the people who in junior high and high school, for whom we didn't respond that much, we tend to not have much interest in that. We go on and do other things because there's this group of people who are getting really strong and buff, and then we're not. So why would we be interested in that? And so you get this selection process going, layers and layers going all the way up into the upper levels of sports. And the people that we tend to go to get stories from and ask advice from are the ones who have been selected into the upper levels of genetic giftedness in how their bodies respond. And maybe in many cases, how little recovery time they need. And if you're taking performance enhancing drugs, one thing that does is it also speeds up your recovery time. So there's a lot of individual variation. You have to watch out for signs like just feeling sore all the time, feeling way too tired all the time, your performance numbers just starting to go consistently down over time. And all of those things probably mean just you need some more rest.
Big time, man. And I'm not even looking for magic bullets here. When I ask you these questions, I'm not expecting, well, come on, you know what you're talking about. Give us the answer. I get it. It's way individual, and I respect individual physiology more than ever in the last several years when I've been learning a lot more about nutrition, particularly, and then in exercise as well. The friend I'm referring to, we joke about it a lot. I respond a little better to things than he does. Let's say less. I get more out of it, and then that. We joked how you mentioned that some people those kind of people tend to think they know more about stuff, right? Oh, you just do this. It's just how you. But anyway, I'm getting it also. I'm really just looking for the way you think about it, and it is extremely helpful. I'll tell you this already. So don't think any of my questions. I'm looking for something more than that. I'm curious in terms of rest. in the context of rest, am I compromising then my rest when I go for a run, or if I went for a bike ride or something, or if I
I think in some cases you might be. So I can tell you in my experience of working with a lot of people who are in different ranges, but a lot of them just kind of in the average range of people that haven't been selected into the upper genetic arena of people. Most average people, if they're training to what they perceive as pretty much failure once or twice a week, and then they're going out and being moderately active other days, that's not going to interfere. But I've had people where it's just like it seems like maybe they're overtraining, or they're not able to lose body fat. And I'm trying to think, is there just too much stress going on? What's happening? And getting them to dial back on even what wouldn't be excessive activity for most people suddenly seems to jumpstart their progress. So I've seen that happen. And again, it's something worth playing with and testing. And I'll tell you, most people are so reticent to back away if they've established something as a pattern, especially, and they feel good about the fact that they're now doing half an hour a day of this whatever activity. To get them to just do a 14-day experiment where they dial back and try it, like, people are really resistant to that. But I've seen it work out in their favor.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I get it anyway, that what we're looking for, though, there's a few signs like the fatigue and the soreness and all that. That might be a sign that, well, maybe I do have to dial it back. How about
but just being generally active. And in fact, let me throw something else in there.
Please.
When somebody starts strength training really well and getting stronger and probably metabolically getting their body shifted to having more access to the body fat on their body as fuel, what we often see is that people feel more energized and have a greater impulse to activity, for lack of a better term, and start to engage in more spontaneous activity and more recreational activity than they were doing before, because they just feel like they want to do it. It's coming from a felt sense of like physical desire to engage in these activities because they have more strength to work with and their body has access to energy to use. And so for that, we just say, go with it. And if you start to feel like you're getting some symptoms of overtraining, back off. But in a lot of cases, it's almost like you can't hold somebody back. They're spontaneously wanting to do more. And that's a good thing in most cases.
That's very good, because that's usually the only time I'm running. I got to get it out. I think, anyway, I won't go on about that. We got to get moving here. I don't want to take up too much of your time today, but the exercise selection, you expressed this in a broad master question, I think, in the talk. I guess, let me put it out there. All else equal, we want to work more muscles simultaneously, eliminate wear and tear, adjust challenge, and safely target level of effort. Right. So that's what we want to do when we're trying to select the most efficient exercises. These are the criteria. Is that right?
That states a lot of it.
Okay. Now you mentioned this. So if I'm doing an inclusive exercise that, so let's say I can get it down to 3 exercises, like maybe like you do, or 3 to 5. If I could,
I got that from Mike Menser, the big 3, the minimum doing a leg press, a pull down, and a chest press, and covering a huge swath of the body's muscles.
Well, that's what I'm looking for. Now, in some part you mentioned that maybe some muscles that are all included might fatigue faster than others. So if I feel that I can't get it all because some are fatiguing faster than others, should I then go off and isolate those muscles with like more high intense until they get up to par, and then go back and try to reduce the number of exercises?
So here the good news is, when you're experiencing that, the ones that are giving out first are being worked the hardest and are getting the most stimulus already for improvement. So one example is doing a pull down exercise with a bar. For most people starting off, their forearms are the weak link, and the forearms give out first, and they don't feel their back working hardly at all. And part of that is just awareness and sensitivity. But what happens consistently is, because the forearms are fatiguing first and being drugged that far along. They get stronger, and then people feel their arms more. And then as their arms get a little stronger, then they feel their lats and their back more. And then it becomes a sense that it's more work. So you're kind of, if you're trying to train to failure and you've got a weak link in there, it's already getting trained more than the others.
Boom. That is, I got it. Beautiful. How about this then? A few pitfalls then, because this is more for like the regular person. There are a lot of people who are, there's a bunch of traps that you enlist, and I wouldn't mind highlighting a few of these here for listeners. So the trap of comparing to others, what's that?
So, well, one way to look at that is just viewing what does somebody else's body look like, and then saying, I want my body to look like that person's body. And then what you'll start to do, kind of similar to what we talked about before, is look to, okay, let me ask that person. If I know that person, or if that person's interviewed in this magazine, well, what did they do? I can tell you, I've trained some of these people that have been in the magazines, and people ask them, what do you do? And I've trained some of these people who barely have to do more than walk through the door of my gym and get nowhere near what most people need to do to stimulate results. And their body's responding, and they're seeing changes by just sitting on barely doing more than looking at the machines we have there, just because of their own genetic luck in that part of life. So the danger there is, it's twofold. It's looking at something unrealistic and then never feeling good about yourself, because we all have different parts of our bodies that are maybe going to be better and worse than other people. And you start comparing, and you maybe don't see your own, what you're gifted at. There's a great coffee table book called Athlete by, I forget, one of the famous photographers, that just, it's a catalog of all of these different athletes, and all their bodies look completely different. And they're all at the top of the game of human achievement and look amazing. But the difference between an impressive swimmer and volleyball player and shot putter and long distance runner, like all these people, they're just a huge variety of body types. And for the most part, I think given what we know, we can't much change that body type. We can optimize within that, but it's not going to change to somebody else. And then, the other downside I mentioned is because we want that, going to get advice from the person who has that, who probably doesn't know how to get that because they were born with it largely.
Mm-hmm. Right, man. Yeah, there's so much you'll get caught trying to do the wrong things because it's not going to work for you, and you also get discouraged. So we just got to accept. I have to think about me and try to figure out and experiment and figure out what works for me is the ultimate counter to that trap, I guess.
And that's the trick of science and exercise physiology, is to try to get away from all those complications and things that would throw us off, and figure out, okay, what really works consistently as a thing in humans, as opposed to what might we perceive to be working if we're being potentially confused by non-causal factors in the mix.
Okay. The calorie burning trap, calories burned during exercise is not equal to net calories burned over time. Can you explain that?
Yeah. And, thankfully, I feel like this is starting to get more and more traction. I just saw, I think, an article in the New York Times in the last month emphasizing this point. But the point being, our metabolisms are variable. Our metabolisms are highly variable. And when people think of how many calories they burn during exercise, what they're typically thinking is like, we have this metabolism that's the same no matter what we do. So if I go in and I burn 300 calories during this exercise, well, that's another 350 calories against the same thing. But that is not the case. By increasing our activity level, it can lower our basal metabolic rate. There's a variety of ways this can happen. If you just look at the activity level of the amount of fidgeting you do and the amount that you get up and sit down and walk around, and you add that up over the 16 hours you're awake or whatever, and it's a little bit at a time, but if you're feeling tired from like say you take somebody who's really trained a lot and they're exhausted, and you start to think about it or look at yourself, how much more lethargic you can be in the basic activities you're doing throughout the day, and add up all those calories. And pretty quickly you can get to 200 or 300 calories without a problem. And, maybe beyond. And then there's other ways that we can slow down, or, obviously we get hungry the more active we are. If you want to be hungry for a giant meal, what do? You go and be really active before the meal. So your hunger level goes up, your spontaneous level of activity goes down until you feed the hunger. But then if you fed the hunger, you burn more calories. So it's a whole complicated situation. And it's not at all as simple as just you've got a static metabolism against which you can raise or lower external activity against. Same thing with food, raising and lowering food if it's the wrong. There seems to be a lot of sensitivity in most of us to things like dense carbohydrates and sugars that cause us to have more difficulty tapping into our energy stores stored as fat. So depending on how we're consuming food, and also sleep affects some of the hormones that affect that. So there's a whole complicated picture, and it can, at a superficial level, it can sound really plausible. Just exercise, 300 more calories a day, and that's 3,000 calories every 10 days, and that's a pound every 12 or 13 days that you're going to be burning off of your body. But that's not really how it works.
Okay. I'll move ahead here to the performance trap. What is the performance trap? I guess we kind of referred to it already. Would we?
Yeah, I think that's just optimizing for the performance, and it's real easy. Again, what's obvious and noticeable is usually the performance in the activity. So if you're lifting weights, it's how much weight are you moving, or how many times are you moving it. If you're running, it's how far did you run, how fast did you run. Whatever that external measure of performance is, becomes the obvious thing to measure. But what we're concerned with in exercise is what are the muscles of our body doing during that process. And I recently heard a story that I didn't know before that I think illustrates this pretty well, that if you take cyclists, that the top level cyclists in a race, they can measure their wattage output, are putting out something like 25 to 35%. I'm not sure if I have those numbers right, but dramatically less wattage that they're putting into the pedals of their bikes winning the race than the people who are way down lower in the race. That they have the skill of being able to draft and take corners and pedal in a way that their muscles aren't working as hard, even though they're going much faster and winning the race. And that's part of why they're winning these races. And so there's a lot of skill that can improve performance, but may not be maximizing the effects that we want, which is the challenge to the musculature in a way that gets our bodies to keep improving and stay improved.
All right. Well, how about the fun trap? What is that one?
Yeah, it's a big. This is where you hear that. Well, people don't do enough exercise, and a big reason people don't exercise is that it's no fun. So what we need to do is tell people, just do something you enjoy, because that's better than nothing. Right. Which obviously there's a lot of truth to that, but the problem is, if we're pursuing just things that we enjoy, we may never get to anywhere close to the kind of benefits that we could have. And what I've seen day in and day out is people who absolutely hated physically challenging themselves when they came in to learn our approach to exercise, where you work really, really hard. And in some senses, it's the least enjoyable thing you can do. Once they got acclimated to that experience and saw the benefits of it, now associate it with something that is pleasurable, not pleasurable in the kind of way of like eating an ice cream cone that you really like, but in a deeply satisfying, meaningful way, where one feels competent to rise to this challenge and do it. So our taste for what we enjoy can change. And often part of what's necessary for a taste to change is to engage in the thing that we don't like for a period of time. So I think while there is some real value in doing things that we enjoy in life, there's also real value to, if there's something that's highly valuable that we're not doing anything close to that, try to engage with that and really do it. And you may cultivate and acquire a taste for that thing along the way.
I've seen that a lot in nutrition, more than anything, and just how I eat over the past several years. It's come to be where things that it's not about just taste good. I mean, everybody understands that how a food dish looks, what kind of dishes you use can enhance your enjoyment of it. Well, the same thing is just what I know about what it's doing for me really improves my experience of it. So not just necessarily the taste. Maybe the ice cream just tastes better than this thing that's not so sweet, but yet is healthier. And but I come to like see this thing as sweet now and perfectly like what the right dessert, not this. Like it just doesn't feel good anymore. So
yeah, those tastes really change. Physical activity tastes as well as food tastes, and sometimes it takes a while. In both cases, I've seen it take well over a year where somebody's stuck to both of those, which might not sound motivating to somebody, but I've seen somebody who really disliked a certain dietary route or exercise route for over a year, and then after that, they came around and said, "I really like this now."
It's a tough sell though, Chad. It's just hard, right? Because it takes a year sometimes, right? I'm telling you, man.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a lot faster than that, and there are elements that are up and down. But hopefully, in both cases, we're deriving meaningful benefits from go, and that deriving the benefits doesn't take a year.
Okay, and the variety trap. Then, what's to be said about mastery over variety?
Yeah. So again, a conventional way that people approach activity, in part because it makes it kind of fun, is to do something for a few sessions as you kind of go up the steep learning curve. And then as you start to get it, what you're going to notice is when you've acquired a certain amount of skill that made you progress and be able to do a lot more with that, then you start to really run into a lot of effort. And less skill, less improvements due to skill, and more that, well, now you're in the slog of your work. You're making your body work hard, and that's typically when people say, "Well, let's jump to something else," because most people aren't thinking this consciously. But what you experience is doing something different. Your skill's lower, and you're going to see a quick progression in your skill at that new thing. But if we were able to somehow measure inside of the muscle tissue, what are the parameters of effort going on in the muscle tissue, I think what we typically see is those parameters of effort start to go up in the first activity, and then switching to the next one, they drop back down to a lower level and then work up. Whereas if you work at mastering using that movement, that skill, you say it's a leg press and approach that, and just sticking with it, then you can keep deepening and increasing those parameters of intensity and effort within that targeted musculature more and more and more, and never have it drop and build and drop and build and go through that cycle.
Okay. I feel like this one's related to the variety traps, the stable baseline trap. I guess first give me what is that, the stable baseline trap?
Boy, now I'm trying to remember what the context was around. I
guess basically
when I said that,
like that when they're not when they actually rise and they hit. Our body is deteriorating, and then we're improving, but it feels like a plateau. We're not actually improving, but we might measure a plateau as progress.
Okay. So yeah, now I remember. So the trap of the stable baseline is to imagine that where we are at today is going to be where we were at 5 years from now. And then to judge as we go against that imaginary line. So if we're engaging in an activity for 3 or 4 years and it's working well, it's not this shot to the moon of progress. It's a lift and then a gradual increase, or kind of a plateau at a higher level. But the thing to realize is that the baseline wasn't going to be stable. It's not, absent big intervention. When we're 40, that doesn't stay the same when we're 80. it's dropping that whole time and it's falling. And if we were to start engaging in activity and year to year to year, see a stable baseline, well, that's progress against what the natural course of events is going to be. And if we see a slightly rising baseline, that's real progress. Much more. I mean, it's real progress just to keep everything at the same level. And I think a lot of people are maybe get discouraged if they don't see improvements against where they were yesterday or last week or last month, much less where they were a year ago. But the reality is we have to have improvements against where we would otherwise be if we weren't doing activity, which is a descending baseline of capacity.
I got it. And actually, your thing today about looking at where I'm going to be 5 years from now, if I'm kind of similar, then can be progress. Is very helpful to add to that. And your whole thing is helpful for me big time, because it's one of the things that's really discouraged me recently. I recall recently I got to a certain level of performance and I felt like, a machine, right? And then let's say I can't blame it all on COVID. It's our own responsibility, but COVID does nudge you towards worse habits in a way. And I lost a bunch of things, and I tried to do some of the things I was doing a year before, and I sucked at it. And I was, oh my God, this is alarming. And then if I could only be back where I was then, I'd consider that some big achievement.
Right.
But I wasn't necessarily enjoying it then. I mean,
you don't know it until you go away.
It's like going, I'm an animal, right? And I just kind of felt like I'm just doing the same thing, and it's pretty easy for me.
And it's easy. So you have to know that and anticipate it, because you're gonna expect to feel like you're in a rut, and then to realize, oh, if I took 2 months off right now and came back, then this thing that feels challenging but not like it's doing a whole lot, I wouldn't be able to do it. And to the extent that I was, I'd get really sore afterwards. And it'd be this whole, slog to climb back up to where I was, exactly like what you were saying. And yeah, it's a common experience. And it's what I always, with clients that I work with that have various circumstances that come up that keep them out for several weeks at a time, it's an eye-opening experience consistently of, oh, wow, I guess I was doing a lot more than I realized.
Man, well, I'll tell you what, going forward, this is a life-saving idea for me. So thank you for that. I didn't have that idea anyway. How about this? I know you took a question of this back in that talk. Is flexibility a good indicator of health and fitness? What's wrong with this standard, if so? And what are some other popularly promoted and accepted but mistaken indicators?
Yeah. So I mean, flexibility, that's a huge topic. I'm just not convinced anybody knows what flexibility actually is to start with. So that,
but I know I don't have it.
Yeah, we tend to lose flexibility over time. Strength training often confers increases in flexibility to some extent. Practicing stretching confers more flexibility. We know practicing stretching is a particularly risk-laden endeavor as well. And there's stats on this that some people have compiled that I've read that I think are true about just yoga, like the amount of yoga-related injuries due to overstretching and people kind of pushing themselves in a little bit the wrong way. And it's not something that people think of a lot, but you can really injure things if you're overdoing it with stretching. Now, obviously, if we're so inflexible that we can't perform activities that we would like to, or getting close to that direction, then that's going to be a problem. But I don't know what's optimal. I mean, I don't think being super flexible. I mean, most people that maintain super flexibility that I know of have joint problems as a consequence of that. So there's maybe some optimal level, and it's an interesting question. It's an interesting territory. I don't. When I see people strength training, what I tend to see in the way that we're doing it, I tend to see not reductions, but slight improvements in flexibility. And
okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just curious in general. I think because people have these ideas like that, and then they say, "Well, this is what I'm looking for. This is the thing," and it might have to do with the fun trap and they just
you can say, like, you can look at some people who are really athletic and in good shape, who are really flexible, and sort of attach to that. Well, I want to be like that person. I want to be flexible. It's an external goal, a performance achievement to have that level of flexibility, which is fine. And it feels good to be physically efficacious in various ways, especially if somebody has limitations. What is the process about that, or by which we attain that flexibility? I mean, that's a whole interesting question that should relate to what is causing the lack of flexibility, which may well be different things in different people. And again, it's just, I would love if you or somebody listening to this has a good resource, because I haven't found it. I've looked for it. I haven't found it where somebody really explains these issues. I would love to see it.
All right, get on the case, everybody. Let's go.
I've looked.
Yeah, right. Well, Chad, how about this? People don't only want to be healthy. They want to look healthy. They want to look good. And you even sell that to people. You say, if you want to take your health and appearance to the next level. And a lot of us have an idea of what a good appearance is. But I always come to think that a certain appearance, people like a certain appearance because it expresses a certain view of the world and certain capacities that others find virtuous and therefore attractive, right? So, but what if what we value, what we're looking for, and in the kind of the internal goals and the longevity, et cetera, that we're looking for clash with what the culture values? We might not want to have the classic looking body, and we're going to look like something different. So I just want to get how you think about this. I don't think that I understand everybody's individual, but I don't think it's subjective. So what is an attractive body?
So is the question, what is an attractive body?
Well, that sounds a little too, I know there's no answer for that, but what I mean is.
Well, there is an answer for that. I mean, there's symmetry, there's.
That's what I mean. So I guess how about this too? I might help the question by adding, how much can you tell by looking at a person about their overall health? Again, there's so much variation, but what might you, as understanding what you do, kind of think, that person probably is not pushing some of those deteriorating circumstances down the road. I can sense that they look to something. Is there anything on this that you think is a good indication, or can you tell anything by looking at a person's body?
Maybe to a limited.
I don't know that.
Maybe to a limited extent. I mean, so there's a lot. The body, the physiology is really complex. And I think there's a lot that's unknown. And this gets into, I think, in the arena of training, you can develop a mind-numbingly complex theory and explanation for why one particular thing is going to work. And you can you can design research and collect evidence for this to say, look, I have these 5 studies and let me explain to you all the theory, and it can all sound good. And then you can go and do that with the opposite protocol for the same outcome, because it's so complicated and because there's so much that we don't know. So one thing is, you can take people who are overweight, obese, have them train and not lose any weight or really look any different from the outside. But apparently, from some of the research I've read, have them dramatically reduce their cardiovascular disease risk, and you wouldn't see that from the outside. And it really in working with people and in reading about this and in integrating what I read and what I see and in talking to people, I think that through pure genetics or a combination between our environment and how we grow up and what foods we eat and our genetics, some of us just get almost trapped in a metabolic vicious cycle that's kind of not going to let our bodies look like another person's body no matter what. But the evidence is that training optimally probably still has a really big effect on that eating and exercising, even if it isn't expressed. And in some people, those things are expressed right away, really fast. In other people, they just aren't. And that's my experience working with a lot of people, is that, the amount of work that some people have to do with their diet and sleep and exercise to get just tiny improvements that are apparent to the eye is massive compared to some other people that, they drink a little bit less of sugary beverages and go on partying and doing whatever. Now, a lot of times those are the personal trainers, actually. And I've got a training studio in LA, in Hollywood, and I've been at events where I've hung out with, I usually don't tell people what I do, so I can just kind of listen. And I hear these guys who are trainers talking about what they do and what they advise their clients to do and laughing about it while they're eating and drinking and doing whatever they're doing. And now, I mean, a lot of trainers are fanatical about all of those things, but some of them, not at all. They know they have the gift and people look up to them for this advice. And so they give it.
Yeah. Right.
So to answer your question, I think there are sort of patterns that you sometimes see that may indicate certain things, but I just don't know if that's a major issue.
Right. Okay. How about this? I know we're getting on time here, so I want to get to a few nuts and bolts here. Rubber meets the road, let's say. What am I trying to do here? I mean, you got to help me out, Chad. I'm looking for something. I just don't want to go in to something where I try to select some exercise and say, well, this seems like it's going to be all more inclusive than another, and I can just focus on these, but yet I'm missing out. What exercises am I looking? What are some of the high leverage exercises I'm looking to do?
So, I go back to the basic advice I learned from Mike Menser when I got into this, was select that he learned from Arthur Jones, that has a lot of research behind it, doing large compound movements that work a lot of large muscles together and go to the point of failure as hard as you can. You don't do that the first time. If you're not used to that, you build up to that, you build up the skill, but you work your way to the point where you're putting in 100% effort, working as hard as you can, and you can't make the weight move or your body move. So like if you're doing push-ups or a chest press to work your chest and arms and shoulders, doing a pull down exercise or chin-ups if you're strong enough to work your back and other parts of your arms that you aren't getting in the push-ups, and a good leg press. Deadlifts are an amazing exercise that go way beyond your legs if you're going to pick any single exercise, but they run into the problem of it's extremely skill dependent to not injure yourself. And if you're trying to also go to muscle failure and match it with a high level of skill, that's a very tricky thing. So some people are big advocates of the deadlift and just say, really learn how to do it and it's great for all ages. I'm not, because I don't think most people are going to put in the time. And then if you have an off moment and get out of focus and you've built yourself up to a lot of weight, you could really easily do something you're going to regret. And so I think a leg press movement is a big, large, addressing quads and glutes and all the leg musculature. And so those three are a good baseline foundational framework of exercises to optimize for. And then you can maybe add some. I also like to work the neck muscles, which is something most people don't do at all or ever think about.
How do you work the neck muscles?
Well, I have a machine or a couple of machines that we use to do that. But it can be as simple as if somebody's not going to the gym, you can lie on your back on the floor with your knees bent, your feet on the floor, and put like a thick book, 1.5 inches, 2 inches under your head, and just press straight down on that book with gradually increasing effort, and do an isometric for like 1.5 minutes where you can really work your neck pretty hard. So there's simple solutions often to all of these things that are pretty effective.
That's what I'm looking for. And determining the ideal resistance is not just heavier, as heavy as I could do, right? It's what am I looking for resistance? You talk about 90 seconds or 3 minutes.
Right. What am I trying to I think for a variety of reasons, maybe starting off with something you can do close to the 3-minute range as you're learning the skill, and then bringing up your skill and level of resistance so that at the point where you're around 90 seconds to 2 minutes, you're hitting that point of muscle failure where it's not that you're giving up mentally, but you've learned how to not give up mentally and really try and find that you can't. And that's that's an ongoing skill that if you're doing it right, you're never really sure if you got there, but you can keep pursuing that for years and years. And having that land at about 90 seconds to 2 minutes will put you in a range where the first repetition or two can kind of be warm-ups, and then you're settled in, and then you're working really hard. And if you're moving slow, it might be 5 or 6 repetitions. If you're moving really slow, it might not even be 10. And then you're going to be exhausted. You don't have to do that twice. You do one set. And nobody who actually does a set like that ever asks to do a second set, by the way. Like the issue never comes up. The issue of how many sets only comes up amongst people who've never done this before. And I used to try to explain this to new clients, and then I just stopped one day and noticed nobody ever asked, nobody ever complained about not doing another set. Like it would never occur to you that you have anything left to give after that.
Right. Good. Another one here is, I was actually alarmed to see that you said over 90% of people sabotage their workouts with poor breathing. Why is that? And how can we develop the right breathing habits?
So, the big mistake is holding one's breath while we're training. And especially as a physical task gets demanding, watch anyone who's trying to open a stuck jar of peanut butter or pickles. And there's a common sight of somebody like gripping down, closing their throat, glottal closure, and doing this Valsalva maneuver where you go and pull this pressure. And if you look around the gym, when people start training hard, they start doing increasing amounts of this. It usually starts when it's like, as they're coming back, there's a big increase in effort to transition from lowering a weight to lifting a weight, from the eccentric to the concentric part of weightlifting, if we want to get technical about it. And that's where most people will start holding their breath a little bit. The second it's hard. And then often that breath holding and Valsalva maneuver will start to extend further and further. And often it'll become the entire positive, where they'll hold their breath and then you'll hear this gasp and they'll start to lower the weight. And then they'll hold their breath again and lift. And often it's not that dramatic, but it's often present. And there's an opportunity to just breathe and to let the respiration and the filling and emptying of the lungs be independent from the degree of tension in the musculature, because the lungs are feeding the blood oxygen, and more importantly, when we're lifting weights, they're actually expelling the byproducts of effort, which come out as carbon dioxide, which and a lot of carbonic acid and carbon dioxide that all eventually gets expelled as CO2 that we don't want to build up. It feels unpleasant in our bodies to have that rising level of CO2 in our blood. So we want to be breathing that out as much or more important than bringing in more oxygen. So just to know that the function is to breathe in a way that as we're working hard, there's going to be a greater volume of air exchange happening at higher levels. And there's studies that measure, people during athletic performances and professional athletes, especially who are really good at this, the level of air exchange that happens gets dramatically more than when we're sedentary. But what's important there is the exchange of air in and out of our lungs. It's not timing that somehow with our movements. The muscle functioning is really contained for our purposes within the muscles, and those can be learned to be independent acts. And I think I breezed right by without mentioning this. But not only does that help the whole exercise be more focused and more calm and help somebody, like if you're getting stuck, getting a weight mood and you're getting to the point of failure, if you're holding your breath at the same time, you're really limited how long you can be stuck there compared to if you're cultivating the ability to breathe freely. You could be stuck there and pushing for another 30 seconds. Not that you don't need to go that far, but if you're breathing, it's the breathing isn't holding you back. But much more importantly, there's a safety concern where doing that Valsalva maneuver of glottal closure and putting pressure up against that spikes your blood pressure, which is why you see, if you observe the faces of people doing that, their faces turn red, veins come popping out of their foreheads at that point and necks, because the blood pressure is rising a lot. And if there's a weakness in a blood vessel in your head and you exceed the strength of that blood vessel, well, that's what's called a stroke. And that we definitely don't want to increase risk of that. And you don't have to. You have an option to keep breathing freely and not engage in that at all, even at the highest levels of effort. So that's what I'll say about that. And unless you have other questions.
Not really, just to develop that, then I guess I just have to be conscious of it and think about it and go, I want to continue to be consistently breathing and not.
Yeah. And like many of these things, and like moving slowly, it can feel really weird at first.
Yeah.
Because we're used to pairing certain things, like holding our breath when we're exerting hard. Yeah. But you start to play with it a little bit, and then you can find eventually that, I can generate all of my strength without having to engage in that behavior. This is pretty nice.
Very nice. How is the temperature of the room, the workout room, important, and how can we optimize that?
Yeah, to the extent that we're working our muscles hard, they get warm.
Yeah, right.
Just like if you're driving your car really hard, the engine heats up, more metabolic activity in the muscles, is more molecules moving around, which is the definition of heat. And it's going to create more heat. You're going to get hot. We've got a limited ability to dissipate heat on the surface of our body compared to internally. So as you get warmed up more and more, that just keeps tend to building throughout the workout. So that gets distracting, it gets uncomfortable, and beyond a certain point, it's going to diminish performance. So working out in an environment where you're not bundled up, you're exposing your arms and legs, wearing t-shirt, shorts, things that let as much cooling and radiative cooling of your body happen as you can is good. That you get more color, more redness, especially around the head and feet and hands as you get warmer, because the blood is getting shunted out to the little capillaries near the skin, it's trying to cool you down. Your body's trying to do that. So we want to help that process, and having a fan and just blowing a little bit of air over you so that you don't end up with this cloud of warmer air surrounding you, but you're moving it out of the way. And also, if you're a reasonably strong person who's working really hard, I find once somebody is really settled into a good workout, you kind of want to start feeling uncomfortably cold at the beginning, like when you sit down to exercise, and within 1 or 2 repetitions, you'll be fine and you'll be glad. You'll be plenty warm at the end, and the room will not feel cool anymore.
Oh, well, that's good, because the gym they got over here, I feel like that a lot of time. I'm like, it's a little chilly in here, but just go for it, right? But anyway, that's great.
Yep.
One more alarming one here was you referred to some of the wrong things you can eat before working out that can undercut the pleasure and the results of your workout. And I was also surprised to see that you added or not eating at all, because I've been kind of on the fasted workouts for the last couple of years. So help me out, Chad. My
perspective on this, it may have changed. A lot of people get really obsessive over what they eat or don't eat. But I've found that in practice, our bodies are highly adaptable. And anything that we do regularly, we'll pretty much adapt to. And I've found that, like, I used to feel years ago, like if I didn't have something within an hour, like something small before I worked out, I'd be affected. Or if I didn't eat something within, and there are all these theories you can read about timing of food with your workouts, and eat something small 15 minutes and then something a little bit bigger 45 minutes after your workout. And I would feel like, man, if I didn't do that, I'd be dysfunctional. My blood sugar would be too low. I wouldn't work. But I've found I can work out on 48 hours fasted, suffer not at all in terms of strength and performance, and then go on with my day and not need to eat pretty much indefinitely after that. And if it's a couple hours before I have anything else to eat, I'm not dysfunctional. But that's, I think, a function of getting just the body acclimated to these variety of factors that we're throwing at it in terms of fasting and working out. And it can be a gradual process. But I think it's not people make a big deal out of it. And I mean, if you're eating a giant meal right before you go to do an intense workout, it's probably going to make you pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah, right. I would think so. And I know so. Yeah, what you were describing there is where I've arrived at myself in the last few years. It's before nothing at all, and then afterward, I don't need to eat. Like I also felt that idea. Oh, you should probably get a protein up or something to make sure you get the benefits out of it and all that right away within 30 minutes or whatever they say. But I do or don't.
Yeah, and I think I think our metabolisms can be in different states. There's probably a better term for it than that. But where it is a problem to not eat something, and where you might be more dysfunctional, so part of the trick, because we can observe some of these adaptations happen to such a huge degree. The question is, can those be studied, and then how do we know where we're at and what's appropriate for any given person? And yet another arena where I don't think we have any semblance of guidance from the research that's been done. And again, if I say this and somebody listens to your podcast and says, "Oh no, I have that," send it on. I want to see it.
Of course, yeah. So most things that I see the trainers doing in my gym when they're doing the personal training, the ladies and all that, and I'm watching them, I'm thinking to myself, they're in there. I see them anytime I go in there. They're in there. I know they're in there every day, all the time, and they're there for hours. And I'm out there in 30 minutes. As I see you later in the next week, and yeah. I just feel like I don't see them making much progress as far as I can tell. Right. And I just wonder.
It's funny. I live in a little bit of a bubble where almost all my time is consumed with working with, our clients or people who are coming at me who are interested in what we're doing. But what I've seen, and I've been at this for more than 20 years, and back then, everybody pretty universally thought that the approach that I was taking was just totally out of left field and crazy, and had a really hard time buying any of it. And now most of the people are coming in like, yeah, my doctor's telling me I need to lift weights. I need bone density. Women should be lifting weights. They shouldn't just be doing cardio. People need to rest. They don't need to, like, a lot of these points that I think we're trying to figure out how do we really optimize for these things, which is a different thing. But the basic points, to a massively bigger extent than I recall in my history, are accepted by at least the people that I encounter. But yeah, I think there still is probably a lot of momentum behind the, women don't want to bulk up and shouldn't lift weights. But the truth is it's really genetically driven, and most men are not going to be able to ever bulk up anywhere close to what they want to. And most women are going to have to worry about that even less. And lifting weights is going to, far from keeping you from being long and lean and toned looking, it's going to enhance that for the vast majority. I think mistakes in gyms. I mean, targeting, just getting too wrapped up in targeting the activity as the goal rather than using the activity to work the musculature. If your goal is exercise for the long range, for just enhancing your quality of life at a foundational level, then not getting caught up in the competitive aspects and the skill aspects and the achievement of whatever the thing is that you're doing, but using that thing to achieve things within the body is just a total perspective shift from how most trainers and people going into the gym approach their exercise.
That idea of doing cardiovascular exercise and that high that people get, with chemicals, endorphins, whatever you would call it. And I know even you mentioned in your talk that after an hour after your big heavy workout, you feel really great for that time.
Mhm.
Is that right?
That's true. I think people vary in terms of self-reporting. People vary quite a bit in how much of that experience they get from any different activities. Seem to affect different people differently in that regard.
Right. So what I wonder then is if we're only doing once every 8 days or so, are we not missing out of that kind of? Is that something positive that is good for our brains and good for ourselves to get that feeling every day by doing some kind of low level cardiovascular, like to get that?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think that's a good case for being physically active in general to some extent, but not. That may be an immediate pleasure and effect outside the scope of exercise defined as deliberate activity to make changes to our physiology.
Okay. I've got,
and then that opens up the world to do whatever activity. Then we can really go with that criteria of what do you enjoy? Because if the purpose is enjoying it in this particular way, well, what creates that event? And what do you do that you enjoy that isn't too dangerous, hopefully? And then we can pursue that. And then if we have more strength from the exercise we're doing, more strength and stamina, then our capacity increases to enjoy a more wide variety of activities, whatever those are. And then we don't have to worry about scheduling in laborious hours and hours and hours of stuff for that particular benefit.
A quick one on the side here. Are there any habits you instill in your kids to set them up long range? And what do they do for exercise? What's inappropriate for them to do, which is appropriate for adults? Like I remember being younger and training for hockey, 12 or 13, they're like, you shouldn't lift heavy weights and all that stuff. And I think of the same thing in terms of nutrition. Like, I don't think you're having your kids do 3-day fast or something, right? Like it's different. No. I'm not sure. Yeah, so it's like, but yet we want to set them up. Like we don't want to sabotage them with bad habits early on so that then they have to just, oh, by the way, now you're 20, you got to change your dietary habits. So what about exercise?
Yeah.
Do you just think about it at all? I mean, how do you think about it? Obviously.
Yeah. It's funny. It's not something I worry about an incredible amount. I mean, kids are growing. They're highly active. They tend to be motivated to be competitive and do certain things. At least my kids, like they'll get, I mean, they go and at recess, they design and run races for fun in sprints. My 7-year-old daughter is totally obsessed about gymnastics. And like, she's probably overtraining, if anything, from just like in the living room, like she can't. So, it's an interesting case where after we reach maybe our mid-20s, that baseline, that downward trending baseline tends to start for most people. Maybe it's early, maybe it's 20 or 19 for a lot of people.
Felt it, man.
But before that, it's like, I mean, growth, like we're just on this rapid trajectory of everything getting stronger and improving. And the amount of energy kids have to expend doing whatever is massive. And like, I mean, my attitude, unless somebody shows me something else, I think just letting them have fun and develop and, they get little, if they're struggling with something, I mean, they see me exercise sometimes and sometimes they want to engage and, I want to try doing that thing. But I think the overwhelming majority of benefits, they're just getting through the process of growth that's taking place. And that any little bit they're going to do on top of that's going to amplify it. And man, the worst thing we can do is take away the spirit of being a kid from a kid. And so, that they're going to pursue all the activities they love and have fun with their friends and whatever is great. But I wouldn't want, unless and there can be circumstances where somebody has a problem and they're kind of doing rehab or they're trying to overcome that. And these things are real. I mean, my kids my little kids are 7 and 9. So they're not that old.
Yeah.
But that's,
No,
Yeah.
I'm right on board with that answer. I generally think, I seem to think the kids are very resilient, and sometimes my ultimate answer when I consider, I don't have kids, but when I think about my kids that I care about that I deal with and stuff, I just think ultimately they're going to be fine. Like they're going to, so long as you are generally a good role model and give them good opportunities and don't take the fun out of their life, they're going to be fine. But I'm just curious if you did have something more, if you just let them eat donuts all day and that's because they like it, well, he likes it, then if you're not really setting them up for a good future. And I just wonder if there's anything that we might be on the lookout for, is all I'm saying. But no, I got the energy.
I mean, there's probably more I could say on that I'm not thinking of right now. And there's always opportunities when they're pursuing something to how to do this better, or you need to like I can't convince my daughter that when her ankle hurts or her knee hurts or whatever, that what she should do is stop doing cartwheels right now, at least for 10 minutes until it stops hurting. You can't convince her of that.
Not picking that up. All right. Well, thank you. I'll give you one broad one here. What you've mentioned some of in your talk you did anyway, and I didn't bring it up here, but some of the medical indicators and the long range, the longevity, the bone density, the gene expression, insulin, etc. What does good health look and feel like day to day? How could I feel it on how do you think about it in terms of your own life? How about that?
Yeah. So again, I think there's a range that people exist in with respect to all these things. And so it's important to notice, are these things trending up or down from wherever you are as part of it? Not just, is there one absolute level that's healthy versus anything else? Because there can be, allergies or various issues that different people have. Various reasons we might have different set points. So I think what you just mentioned are good, just level of energy, ability to focus, ability to be physically active when you want to, the ability to feel some of that impulse activity, some of that desire, that physicality. If you look at, again, it's huge with kids, that it's just a natural, like they can't sit still. Yeah. I mean, they literally can't sit still. They got to start climbing over the back of furniture and throwing things and making things. And there's just this sense of being energized that they need to do something with. And so you can think, well, where directionally, over time, we move away from that as we age. You can see that, but how do we minimize or move more toward that feeling of vibrancy? Like, I feel like doing something physical, or I enjoy the act of doing something physical because I have my body metabolically, physiologically in a state to access and make use of energy and make use of my strength.
All right. Well, I'll take that for an answer to wrap it there. Is there anything else, though, that I haven't asked you that you would like to? You just think I really should mention this, or are we good?
No. Like I said, I just kind of showed up here to have this discussion. Yeah.
Well, I didn't think likely how long I took you. So very good. To listeners then, if you have a question about this or a comment, you may ask in the comments section where you're consuming now, or you may go to the Mr. Brightside Facebook page. That's facebook.com/MatthewBolton.ca, or you can contact me directly at matthew.asknow@gmail.com. And of course, please share this interview with anyone who would enjoy hearing this or who you think needs to hear it. Chad, where should people go if they want to connect directly with you and learn more about you and your work?
My website is myogenicsfitness.com, MYOGENICS fitness.com. I'm on Twitter. I don't use it that much, and Facebook. They can reach out to me, chad@myogenics.com. I get a lot of email, but I might get back to you. Send me a message there. And I think that pursue those avenues and you could probably find me.
Excellent, Chad. Well, thank you so much for making the time and going the distance with me today. I know you're very busy, but you really have helped me clarify a lot of things and saved me and my friends and listeners untold wasted energy, effort, time, and also from a lot of anguish and discouragement, because I mentioned the the COVID idea, I really need a reboot here. And I was really looking for, well, am I going to go back and do some of the same things that are not really as high leverage as they might be? And to go back in, it's very motivating to go back in with the idea that I'm going to do something that I think is really going to pay big dividends and be, very, as I said, high leverage and really worth the while. So I thank you much for that. And, for your years developing your ideas too. Anyway, so thank you very much, as I say, and thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Okay. And listeners, take heed in what Chad is saying and take your own health and appearance to the next level without taking all your money, effort, and irreplaceable time to get there. Be happy and be healthy. I'll see you guys next time.
One thing that the people are really reluctant to do is to just test it. Mm-hmm. To just for these ideas to say, that sounds crazy, but okay, so do it for 2 or 3 weeks, like really do it, or however long it takes you to get up to really doing it, and then do that for some small period of time. And say, it's worth a test. I think like with nutritional stuff, it's always like, what would be a period of time during which you can test this and kind of see how it works and see what the trade-offs are. There's, with any of these things, there's trade-offs. It's going to take a certain amount of effort. It's going to take a certain expensive time. And you throw the tests, and then are the upsides worth the downsides? Mm-hmm. So that's one way I try to communicate it to people, is give it a shot.
I'll tell you what else, Chad. So I had Lisa on already, and now I've got you. I wonder about cocoa's availability. No?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I'd be looking to talk to that Seth too. He seems pretty wise as well. I would talk to him on anything and learn something, I'm sure. That boy.
Yeah, well, he puts up his own little YouTube videos from time to time.
Does he put up his YouTube?
Seth's channel on YouTube. Yeah, if you look up Seth's channel, SETH''S.
Mr. Brightside, your time out to refresh, refuel, and refocus your mind and energy toward building an optimistic framework for flourishing. Life is good. It's up to you to choose the bright side.